welcome to your Daily Game Face. I'm Dr. Kimberly Lannon. I'm laughing because Lou always makes me laugh in the morning.
Oh, yeah. I make a lot of people laugh.
Oh, he's in a funky mood.
I am not in a funky mood.
I can tell. This is what I do for a living.
I'm focused.
You're focused.
I'm focused.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. It's like a sauna in the studio today. I'm sweating. I should have worn a tank top or a bathing suit because by the time I'm done, I'm going to be swimming out of here. Oh, my God. Who turned the heat up?
And talk to Deb on your way out.
Oh, my God. Anyway, well, it's...
If I say something, they'll turn the heat up. So.
All right, well, I'll say something as I go downstairs when I leave. It's a beautiful day here. We had a really yucky weekend in terms of weather. It was horrific, and I had multiple conversations with people over the weekend about how Memorial Day is notorious for being like a winter day.
Is it?
Well, when I grew up in Vermont, we would go to Lake Bomazine.
It's Vermont.
And don't be picking on Vermont. Listen to me. And when we go to Lake Bomazine for our pilgrimage of picnic start of the year, I remember people sitting around fires and the old-fashioned grills, the ones that are ground into the ground, in blankets and sweatshirts next to the water, in trying to get in and go swimming and having a good time, but we were freezing and everyone's blue.
But that's Vermont until Father's Day, isn't it?
But it's just okay for the past 30-something years.
Where is that
more,
lake,
I've been living
by
in
the way?
Massachusetts. It's still the same.
Okay, where is that lake, by the way?
Lake Bomazine.
Yeah.
It's just I'm going northwest of Rutland, Vermont. So it's sort of near Killington, near Rutland.
Okay.
But it's not up towards the mountain north. It's a little more west.
Mm-hmm.
So central, but west.
I see.
So it's very pretty. It's a beautiful lake.
Oh, it's all beautiful up there.
And what?
It's all beautiful up there.
Yeah. That's the claim to fame for Vermont.
It's a pretty
except
state.
for the other claim to fame, which for people that know I love to tell the story that have been around me, is that, well, my hometown is one of the biggest drug running towns in the whole country for heroin and cocaine. Awesome claim to fame.
Well, the Canadians have to get their drugs somewhere.
We have to have something from Canada coming down through the pipeline. And there was actually a documentary on the actual fame and infamy of Rutland, Vermont, which is where I'm from.
I no longer have to go up to Burlington, but I've been going up several times a year for my son. And there are places, this is America in 2021.
Yes.
There are places on that trip, which, by the way, are interstate highways mostly,
Yes.
where you have no cell service and no radio.
Exactly. Well, if you have Sirius radio, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you have normal car radio, you get AM channels.
Yeah.
Yes.
You might get
this is Vermont.
You might get the same NPR station on like three different
And people don't
frequencies.
believe me when I'm traveling up north all the time. And I'm like, I don't have cell service. And they're like, right.
Yeah,
I'm like, no,
I know.
seriously, I don't have
I get
cell
the same
service.
thing.
It's like a great excuse because I really don't.
Yep.
Because it drops out and you be mid-conversation like, yeah, I'm done.
I wasn't sure about the last time I had to go up for commencement. I wasn't sure about the car, and I'm going. There are places you could break down on that trip where they would never find you again.
Oh yeah. Well, so for people that are in New England and that travel that road, they know 89. So it's a highway.
Yep.
And in the winter, because I used to travel it all the time, going back and forth to my hometown, you can be driving midday, beautiful sunny day out, and it will become a whiteout snow condition, and good luck. Because it is one of the scariest roads. The state police warn you about it. I've known about it since I was like 15, 16, because that's when you get your license in Vermont back in the day. And I would drive that road and wouldn't be able to see. And I thought, if I go over into the ditch, I'm done.
Yeah.
There's no finding you.
Never
ever.
find you. Yeah.
It's very scary.
It'll be March before they pull a car out.
Yeah.
Go into a ditch down there. Yeah.
Right. So Vermont is beautiful, and it will bury you in the ditch.
Yeah.
Potentially. But the Memorial Day weekend nonetheless was beautiful, except because it was relaxing, whatever, at least it was for me, but it was freezing.
Yeah.
And it rained the whole weekend. But now today it's 90.
Yeah.
We went from 45 degrees over the past 4 days. Now we're at 90, and we're going to have 90 degrees for the next 10 days.
It's so New England. They give you this 70 and 80 degree weather for about a week, and then they plunge you back into sub 50. And it's like, God, I can't deal with this.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Saw a meme. It said if you've got the heat and the air conditioner on in the same week, you're from New England.
That's me this week.
Yeah.
I had the heat and the air conditioner and the fans all going on the same day at the same time at one point.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's a little.
I couldn't keep up with the weather changes. It was like, whoo.
That's a little off, but yeah.
So anyway, so keeping our happy faces and our game faces, I saw the cutest thing this morning. You know how much I love animals.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving here, and across my road, 3 little kits, little fox kits, came flying across. They got so confused. I don't know where Mama was, but they were running back and forth and back and forth. And of course, I couldn't catch them fast enough. But I caught one on catch them on film. And I was in my car.
Gonna say, what are you out trapping the foxes?
No, I wasn't trying to catch them. Capture them on film. They were super cute. So be mindful of all the babies out there right now, because all the fawns are being born from the deer, and all the baby kits from the foxes, and all the baby coyotes and all that stuff. So, but they're super cute. Super cute. I love them all. So, and
my animal update is the greenhead traps are out on Plum Island. So.
And for all of you who are listening that don't know what the greenheads are, and I've referenced it before, they are the worst, nastiest little flies. They will take a chunk out of you, and you will not recover for a year. So you don't go to where Lou lives pretty much from the end of June till the end of August, because they're going to eat you alive.
Yep.
And it's too bad, because it's a beautiful beach, but they will get you.
It's overblown. I think that's the way people kept people off Plum Island.
The greenheads?
They're not great. Don't get me wrong, but it's a little overblown. Or maybe the traps work. I don't know. Yeah.
Just keep it with the. It's terrible.
Yep.
So.
So are we talking about aliens?
Are we what?
Are we talking about aliens? Because the government's coming out with its release soon.
Well, we weren't going to talk about aliens until you told me when I came in today that we're being invaded by aliens.
I didn't say that.
Okay, what did you say?
I said, what are people going to do when we find out about the aliens?
Was that really what you said?
I think it's something to that
I could have
effect.
sworn you talked about us being invaded, but
no.
Okay, so this isn't new. Come on now, we've been invaded by aliens.
There are new things going on. The government is doing a softening the ground leak of things. They're preparing us for this.
Yeah.
And then they've announced that they're going to release information.
Listen, if you haven't flown over Area 51 and aren't a believer by now, then I don't know where you've been. Come on now. Of course, the aliens. I mean, I could tell you 4 hours worth of a conspiracy theory of my father's forever on aliens, which I won't, because it'll make me need to go into an institution. But
me being the threat generator I am and the cynic that I am, why is this all going on now?
Oh,
theoretically, the aliens have been here since the 50s, since Roswell, right?
You would figure that they've been here forever.
Okay, fine. Yep, right? Fair enough. Why is the government all of a sudden cooperative? Why is the government going on 60 Minutes? Why is the government having a quote-unquote release date? Why is the former president talking about aliens on a podcast? What's going on?
There's so many things I could say here, but we should just move on.
And I don't think it's aliens. I think it's deflection from something else.
Oh, well, so interesting, because that's a psychological phenomenon, given that we're your daily game face and talking about psychological phenomenon.
That's why I asked. And
so there could be lots of reasons, and without me getting in trouble for some of the reasons I would think, but there are, we see this. I believe if you go back into the 1950s and 60s, and I've had conversations with several pilots that are patients of mine, and several other military spec op people that have talked to me about certain things over their years and what they've seen and whatever. This is not, I think it's because it's now outward more. This would be my opinion, that it's now outwardly being brought out more because more and more is being talked about, because more and more can be talked about, because it's social media, because people are whatever. And I'm sure there could be multiple reasons why, right now there could be an agenda. But I think if you go back into the time when, Area 51 was being built and when that whole thing was going on, it was pretty big back then. I think if we'd had social media then, this is just speculation, we would be feeling the same kind of thing, because it was so obvious at the time for so many people across the country of sightings and pilots and people reporting incidences. So I don't know if it's necessarily bigger and more versus just now it's more easy to get the access, like most information.
Specifically for me, it's the tone of the government towards this. I mean, there's been talk and speculation.
To the government, you don't do that.
No, because you need to listen. You need to understand what their motivations are. You can't ignore them, because they'll sneak up behind you.
The first issue is you're trying to say that you have to understand their motivation.
Yes.
So
what changed between now and the 90s, for example? What changed between now and 2010? Why are they all of a sudden going on national TV and yapping about this?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, but I'm gonna roundabout to a different topic.
Okay.
Because I know, Lou, you want to talk about that, but I have to be in the frame of mind to talk about that.
I get
And
that.
I am not in that frame, but we'll talk about it after, and then we'll come
In a
back.
couple weeks when they release the information.
In a couple weeks when
whatever
they tell
it
us
is they're
that
trying
we're
to
being
tell us.
invaded and they're living
Yeah.
underground underneath us.
Yeah.
Or that I won't tell you what my father thinks, because it'll make him look like...
I have a theory too, but it's going to get me in
so
all kinds of trouble.
listen to me. Stop.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So very important to my business and my clientele is Naomi Osaka. Big news.
Okay.
The tennis champion of the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Young girl from Japan. She plays for Japan. She's got like all the Grand Slams. I mean, so she's come under fire, and she ended up walking out of the French Open because she got huge criticism because she missed two of the press conferences that were being done after some matches this past weekend, and she got fined $15,000. Totally unfair, and this is why. So given that I do this for a living with sports psych and
Yep.
performance and people with social anxieties, and she got criticized heavily right out of the gate from lots of people, including other tennis players, big time, and came out against her. But then she disclosed some of her stuff that's not new. So what the deal is, and you and I have talked about this before, athletes, whether it's recreational or superstar top headliners,
Right.
a lot of athletes, not some, a lot, have anxiety. They have mood disorders. Look at Michael Phelps. This is not a new informational piece, right? The reason why I do the job I do with sports and athletes is because of the issue that Naomi Osaka is talking about. So her thing was that, and this isn't new in terms of, she's been telling us for years, she's young, so for the past few years, that she has severe social anxiety when talking with the media. She has severe social anxiety when talking about her game, and it takes her off her game. So coming from the background as a sports, and clinical psychologist, right? Of course, this is something that she should speak up about, to say, I can't do press conferences because it puts me in a place that makes my head not right, essentially. I'm paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. And it makes me have struggles, because when she won a couple years ago, ever since she won, she was fighting this more and more social anxiety pressure, feeling of having to perform more for camera than her actual game. So you have a camp of people that are in the tennis world and other athletes that are like, oh, well, she has a duty and responsibility to speak to the public. Yes and no, because, there's plenty of superstars out there that are in, mainstream TV or whatever, that don't speak ever. You don't see Goldie Hawn coming out every time she has like a moment, or there's
That's your reference, Goldie Hawn?
Well, I'm just thinking about people that are much more private and reclusive in terms of like their commentaries, and that don't speak a lot, and when they do, it's very small, because they just keep private, and it's not expected.
But wait a second, let me press the alternative here.
The
difference is she's active. The sport is a business.
Yep.
Marketing, them making press conferences after events, especially someone who's a winner and such a prominent athlete in the sport, needs to go out. All sports have a mandatory press availability.
So it's not mandatory necessarily. So here's the thing. So I counter back, given that I've been at this level, not her level in terms of like the number one, but it's not mandatory. It's just kind of a thing that we do. You're supposed to get interviewed after you win. You're supposed to get interviewed if you lose. You're just supposed to be a spokesperson for the sport. But remember, you're playing the sport for the sport. You're playing for the title for yourself. You're playing to improve yourself. You're playing for your own reasons. And she's been very clear, just like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods has anxiety and all those things, and he was really forced. I would imagine, I don't know this, he might have something else to say. It would be interesting to hear what he has to say, given that his background with his family and stuff like that, his anxiety issues. But there's plenty of athletes out there who have been forced and coerced into the media frenzy of speaking up afterwards. And she does a great job, but she's super nervous. And she's telling people that if I do this, it takes me off my game. So she withdrew from the French Open. And we've got the Grand Slam coming up. She's withdrawn. She's got Wimbledon coming, and she's withdrawn out of the French Open because she did not want the pressure of having to speak that was taking her off her game. The first and foremost thing in her athletic life is to be able to play her sport, to be at the top of her ability. If if someone, if something's getting in the way of that, you eliminate that thing that gets in the way of that. So, there's such a stigma still, unfortunately, to anxiety and depression and her admitting to it and all these things. But this is not uncommon in athletes, especially high-level athletes. And that's why I made that little piece about, like, it's recreational too. But when you're at a high level and you're expected, I'm of the mind to say if a person is in the middle of their event and they're playing crappy or great or whatever, it is up to them whether or not they're going to speak, because that's a game changer for them potentially. Having one conversation with some reporter that might ask a question that might make them feel certain thing. I can't tell you how many times I've had to step into pro athlete mindsets with them to say, block that out, don't listen to that. There's a reason why I have, like, my athletes keep earphones in. Naomi Osaka reportedly does the same thing, so she puts out all the noise. She doesn't hear all this stuff. I mean, this poor girl won and beat Serena Williams and was booed off the court because she beat Serena. And she had to take all that burden because she was better than. Yeah. She's a young girl. She's a young tennis player who happens to be a phenom, and she's amazing. And it's overwhelming to her. So it's about, like, backing off. It's not like Simone Biles is used to. Simone Biles is the goat of gymnastics, right? The greatest of all time.
Yep.
She's been raised from baby all the way up through, because this is what us as gymnasts do. We get raised with the pressure of social media, not social media at the time for me, but media. There were, even at congresses that we went to, they have gymnastics congresses and the skating federation. They all have these things. You go to these big conferences. And you go and you train to be in front of camera. You get trained by people from ESPN to do on-site quick interviews and all that kind of stuff. So, she doesn't want to take part in that. And I kudo her, as opposed to the people that criticized her about, like, oh, this is a responsibility. You have to do that. I believe Billie Jean King came out and said, she's a social figure. She has to do that. Well, maybe she needs to find a different venue for her to be able to speak about these things, but not during her event. I'm all for her staying in her mindset for her event.
I've got no problem during the event. If she decides not to do media availabilities during the event, that's fine. But you win the tournament, you got to go out and do an event.
So that's
you're going into a tournament. You got to do an event. So if I was working
with her, which I'm not, but if I was working with her, I would be completely supportive of the fact that during the French Open, while she's playing, in between matches and day to day, if she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to.
Right.
Like, there's no reason to have that interfere in her mindset of having to take her out of the game. At the end, I would say, hey, let's make it so that we practice doing a couple-minute interview about how it felt, how you felt you played, and really getting used to that, and we'd work, more like exposure therapy, because she deserves the right and the privilege of her own choices to be able to do that. So I think that it's, this is a prime example of so many times that I see athletes just get forced into talking about their sport or their performance and having to critique it when they haven't even gotten to process it yet. And then you put yourself out in front of, like, a whole bunch of critical people who are going to say something. It's very different than Kyrie being out there talking, right? I mean, you take this young tennis player who is just playing tennis to play tennis versus, someone who's playing for superstardom and going out there and being like, I'm Kyrie,
First of all, how young is she?
I think
teenager?
I think now she's 20 or 20.
Yep. Is she a Japanese national? Is English?
Yes.
Is English?
She's playing for Japan.
She's strong in English?
What?
Is she strong in English?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just show us a bunch of Bill Belichick interviews.
You what?
Just show her a bunch of Bill Belichick interviews. What do you do when you don't want to do a job? You just be bad at it, and then nobody asks you to do it anymore. Just go out and do bad interviews, and no one will ask you anymore.
Right, and I think, so there's a couple things. This should be interesting. Here we go. I think that there's a gender thing here.
Sure.
There's a sport-specific thing
here.
Yep. Yeah, that's where I'm going to go. So psychologically, there is a pressure on females to be able to answer in a certain way and to talk about their experience in a certain way.
Yep.
You can see it in the way that people interview female athletes versus male athletes. I've been on the backside of that, certainly.
But the Williams sisters don't fit that mold. They've played themselves out of that mold.
They have played themselves out of that mode, and they are very... they have a stylistic difference in the way that they do interviews. They're much more abrupt, pragmatic, and one or two words like Bill Belichick, but with more emotion. And I think it was Serena yesterday, I believe, came out and said, we're all different. We all approach the media differently. We all attend to it. We all have our own stuff. And a sort of an appreciation for Naomi's stance that, but it's about Lou, it's about this social stigma around anxiety and depression that this poor girl has to out herself. And I'm not saying poor girl as in pity for her, but poor girl, like, it's her private business, and her standalone commentary of like, I don't want to do this interview right now because I'm in the middle of the Open, and this is going to get me off. She just started out by saying something very basic, very innocuous in general, by saying something like, this is, given my anxiety, I get very overwhelmed. She was very super honest, and then she got attacked for it.
Yeah.
For being honest about something that plagues millions of people across the world. Like, and it's just why, and so it gives a message to not only athletes, you can't speak up because you're going to get shunned. So now that's going to increase your anxiety because now it's going to impact your performance, right? And also it's sending to fans and role modeled people that if you have this, you got to kind of keep it under wraps because we don't talk about that. And it counters everything I try to do in my job is you have anxiety, you got to go with it. You got to let people know I'm anxious, because it's part of to show me someone that doesn't have anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, give me anybody today, walk up to me, and if they tell me they don't, I'll find it. There's no way that people can't get through day without having some level of anxiety. We all have it. Our bodies regulate up and down all the time. Some people are more severe and are really bad, and then some people are just like, they get anxious, nervous, and then it passes.
Our struggles put us in conflict with the world, though.
Yes.
And like, for example, if you had a guy who had severe social anxiety and he was going to apply for a sales job, where he's got to go out and walk in businesses and talk to people, cold call people, not the job for him.
Right.
And on top of that, that business they need salespeople to go out and do revenues. If you're at the U.S. Open, you need to get TV rights. To get TV rights, you have to give the TV people access to your superstars because that's what they want.
Right.
So there's a basic conflict here that has to be resolved.
Well, I think that yes, and it can be resolved in these instances for certain players if they so choose that they don't get interviewed in between.
Oh yeah, I'm all on board for that.
If
an athlete wants
if Tom
to
Brady's playing, we don't have a full blown interview. You see him; he walks in, he's got his earphones on. Nobody's going up to him and saying, "How are you going to do today?"
Right.
Right. It's after the one-time game, and then there's a week and a half in between, or whatever. For someone that's got to play, 4 rounds within 2 more hours, within 2 more days, and you're being asked, like, how do you think you're going to play? Do you think when you miss the ball that now you're everything that would be counter to what we try to get into the mind of a trained mind of an athlete is like, we don't want to go back and think about what happened. We just want to go let it go and move forward because now you've got people that are the Monday morning quarterbackers going, wow, how did you let that one go? And now that's all in your head, and you still got to play 2 more matches.
I'm fully on board with that.
Yeah.
If she doesn't want to speak during the tournament, and I mean completely during the competition.
This is just my idea for it.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
This is my solution to
her job
issue.
is to compete. That's her job. Go out and do it.
Right.
She shows up at the tournament beforehand, do an interview after the tournament. You make yourself available for an interview during the tournament. You don't want to speak, don't speak. Right. I don't have a problem with that.
Right. And I think that's what's probably going to happen. It's going to be having to be addressed in this way, in some way like this. And this is, given what I've heard over the past 2 days of what's gone on with Naomi, if I had my hands on it and hands with her in helping her, I'd say, we need to strike this deal. We probably need to make a change across the tennis association, the international tennis, the federation, so that we get this equalized for people in general to address the issues. I mean, Michael Phelps, I'm sure, will have a lot to say about this. The most decorated, U.S. Olympic swimmer of all time, just like Simone Biles. Anybody that's at that level who knows what the pressure are, they're going to have...
Oh, you remember Marshawn Lynch?
Yeah.
I'm just here not to get fined.
Yeah.
That was his entire press conference because he didn't want to do the press conference.
Right.
I'm just here not to get fined.
Exactly.
Yep.
And there's a reason why, and
I guess your point is Marshawn Lynch was accepted, probably a male-female thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because, when girls say no,
yep.
even though oh, I'm sure I'm going to get backlash on this, even though we've progressed and all these things. But psychologically, there's still that piece of like, oh, she's difficult, she's a pain, she's a diva,
Yeah.
what a witch, what a bitch, blah blah blah. Can I say that on here?
Sure.
So,
But we do say things about men. I mean, look at Kyrie the last
week. But in
week.
a different way, and it's more accepted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of like the old euphemism that's not really that old is like if a woman goes out and has sex with everyone, she's slutty and hoary.
Yeah.
If a man does it, you know how men are.
Yeah.
It's the acceptance piece
Gotcha.
of how so they're doing the same behavior yet how it's deemed. So so Naomi says, I can't do this.
By the way, Kyrie is another great example of a professional athlete who just said he was done with interviews. I mean, he doesn't hold up that,
right.
but because
because the way he does it, he gets nailed for it.
Yeah.
Because he's very blunt, as we know, and then that's why people hate him, but they love him, but they hate him because he's blunt. And so I don't think Kyrie ever got fined, but she got fined for not speaking. And that's, see, the difference makes me cuckoo. I don't think he got fined for not speaking or for saying, I don't want to do this, because she never came out.
Well, I'm willing to bet if it were the NBA Finals and he didn't want to speak to the media, he'd get fined.
Maybe.
I would.
Well, I think that should change.
And I think there are post-game requirements in place. I don't know. I don't know what the NBA is.
I don't know. I don't know all of the rules on the media part of that.
But Bill
Bill
has to speak. Tom had to speak. The quarterback has to speak. The coach has to speak.
Right.
Post-game.
Well, but it's not that I don't think it's a has to. It's just what is and what's been expected. I'm not sure. I would imagine that there's written in contract like that you have X amount of media that you have to do and blah blah blah, because that's part of the deal from the money. However, I do know that within the U.S. Figure Skating Association, the tennis, the gymnastics, to my knowledge, the contracts don't say that, because those are not professional athletes technically. I mean, tennis has a little bit different because they're considered pros, even though they go to the Olympics and whatever. But it's not expected out of contract, more out of like just social obligation that you're supposed to do this. And I think it needs to be revamped. I think that she's gotten a bad rap. I think that this is not okay mental health wise. It sends a bad message to the mental health community of people who seek help, who are afraid and don't have a voice, that want a voice, and now are going to be stifled because if they speak up, they're going to either get ostracized, fined, metaphorically or whatever. And so I think it's an important issue. So I wanted to bring it up because sports psychology is near and dear to my heart, as we know. And I think that it's a personal choice, and I absolutely see a reason for the person who wins Wimbledon or the Grand Slam or anything like that should absolutely be able to answer questions after the fact, even if she has to sit with someone and say, Naomi's not going to be able to talk about it a little bit, but I'm going to be able to tell you a little bit about it. And she's very articulate. But she'll say when she's talking, she's been interviewed before, and she said, I'd rather not answer because I'm afraid I'm going to give the wrong answer. She just gets too caught up in it. So she probably needs more practice and whatever, but I'm not of the mind to force someone to go into doing something that they don't want to do if it makes them want to throw up. And if it's going to kill her performance and psych her out, what a great strategy for another teammate to be able to say, this is how I'm going to get her to not win. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But there's psychological warfare on the playing field all day long.
I know that, but sometimes when it's active, it's like saying we're going out and hunting deer. The deer don't know that it's a sport. We're going to go out, but the deer have to be on the same playing field. They don't know, though.
Right.
Same thing with her. She doesn't know. She knows, but she doesn't know. So
the other conflict I see is if you and you're right, there needs to be a recognition for anxiety as well as any number of conditions that athletes are facing. But the problem is, what's going to happen is one athlete, she legitimately shields herself because of the anxiety she's struggling with, and Kyrie's going to say, I have social anxiety. I don't have to do interviews.
He's not going to say that.
Well, there are going to be athletes who do.
Well, there will be, and that's fine, but it's not going to be Kyrie.
Yeah, true.
He might say other things, but that's not going to be one of them. And it won't be without some 4-letter expletives, I'm sure.
That's right.
Because he's just angry. He's got other issues.
It's all kinds of things.
That's a whole other...
Kyrie's a great fun. Yes. Listen to him, yeah.
I actually enjoy his interviews. They make me very entertained.
Oh, yeah.
You never know what's going to happen because he's so blustery.
Yeah, I mean, they're entertainment if nothing else. It's like watching the Joker on a Justice League movie.
I know, right? So I don't know. I can't see any commentaries this morning at this point. But if anyone has any thoughts on this or any commentaries or input, certainly type it on in so that I can read it or Lou can read it to me. Lou, do you see anything out there?
Not at the moment. I haven't got on that page yet either.
Okay, so I just thought it was very timely. We're coming into the Olympics.
Yep.
In terms of Naomi's supposed to go into the Olympics for Japan. She's supposed to go in for the Grand Slam and go into Wimbledon here shortly. And hopefully this will get resolved out for her and for other people to come out. I feel empathy for the fact that there was an initial attack on her.
Right.
And we've improved our mental health system around athleticism so greatly that I was really disappointed yesterday. I'm on the treadmill last night and I'm like watching the news and saying, this is horrific that here's what I do for a living, and I was cringing going, how embarrassing that I actually help people, and then this was all counterproductive to everything I do with professional athletes.
I'm curious about your line in this particular thing because as I look at it, having worked in sports media and seen interviews and things like that.
That's why I thought this was a great topic, because we're on like the opposite ends of the camera on this one.
Yeah, I've been in these things. I see what they're like, and I guess I understand the social anxiety, but to me, it doesn't seem like that big a deal, and because I don't suffer from the kind of anxiety she does. But as a therapist, where does the line fall between you got to push her a little bit to deal with this because it's really not that big a deal, or between no, we've got to shield her from this because it is a big deal? I mean, that's a really interesting borderline, isn't it?
I think it goes to interesting because it goes to your point that we've talked about for well over a year about it's a matter of threat generation, and you've worked yourself through your threat generation to understand what it is. You've identified it, you got through it, you've made lots of changes, all those things, and you didn't have to do it on camera all the time.
She plays in front of 20,000 people,
different.
which you would think would be more anxiety-inducing than talking.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give the personal example for myself, hence personal. So when I was doing gymnastics, I could go into an arena of 20,000 people, perform, know they were all there, never worry about one iota of them, all of them, whoever they were, being there, because I was so focused on just doing, but then stop me and ask me to talk about it. And maybe this is why it's pushing my buttons too.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Stop and ask me to talk about it after the fact or going into something. The fact that the consciousness of, it's not judgment, but the way it was going to be criticized or seen of what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, how I, was I a good report? I was also young. I mean, thought this was everything prior to 18 years old. So
right.
I'm a young mind trying to think, what is the right answer? Even though we'd been coached by ABC and NBC and ESPN news anchors, all this stuff coming up through different conferences, that was like, oh my God, it was like freeze moment. And I would do it, but I would be sweating, but no one would see it. But it was this visceral polyvagal response of dysregulation of like, this is not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is going out and walking on a 4-inch beam that's 4 feet high and not dying. I'd rather do that than talk to you.
Yeah,
so
I
personally get it's not, you are able to block that out. It's not personal. It's not right here in front of you. It's not having to look at the generation of the threat that's there that you're looking at going, what is this person thinking? What is this person feeling? What are they going to judge me on? All these different things that I would imagine Naomi's going through when she sits in front of a panel of people going, well, what do you think? And why'd you make that mistake? And what is going on? And do you think you could have done it better? And you're like, oh my God. Yeah. Like, I just want to go out and do.
I understand the challenge. My question was, did
I not answer your question?
You didn't answer my question.
Oh God, you're so mean to me today.
My question was, if you're going to face 10 girls with this issue, I'm guessing some of them you're going to decide, I need to get her more comfortable with doing the interviews and push her in that direction. And there are others that you would say, she's not going to be able to handle this. I have to shield her from this.
Right.
And I'm wondering what the dividing line is. How do you determine which ones you try to...
I have the answer for you.
Okay, excellent.
God. You're so fresh today. Everyone out there, he's so fresh today.
No, he's just villainizing me.
The answer is how it's impacting the person on an individual level functionally. is it impairing them to the point where they're not functioning, like that they can't perform? That would be a good one.
Yep.
Or that they start making mistakes that they don't normally make in practice, or they get hurt. Like there's really specific dividing lines of where to shield from and where to be like, it's okay.
Yep.
It's usually just in the functionality. And it's like any mental health issue. Where is the impairment to the point where you have to really intervene more? It's when it's functionally impairing a person to the point where they're not functioning to the normal or their baseline.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the easiest answer. Did I answer it for you?
But all of the girls in that situation would be in that, their function would be impaired by their anxiety about doing interviews. And what I'm thinking with this girl is someone gets to her and puts her in front of interviews and teaches her to deal with this. Her world's wide open. In other words, this doesn't seem like a high bar.
Okay, but if you were listening,
yeah,
I know. God, this is like being at home this week with John, not listening to me.
I'm with you, John.
Listening skills. Listening skills. The blessing. Remember that from Vacation? Christmas Vacation? Listening?
No. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag. Okay, you're not listening. No. But it's the continuum and putting someone, so like her, what I would do is I would do exposure therapy, like I said at the beginning of our talk today, is I would do a little bits of exposure therapy between the two of us, mock interview, set up a camera, start seeing where she starts struggling, seeing what comes up, having her walk it through, what she feels uncomfortable with, what kinds of questions. I mean, it would be a very thorough process of breaking it down to then reintroduce through some kind of exposure therapy of like, hey, I'd get like Peter Carruthers to come in and say, let's sit down with Naomi and you field her some questions and like do some exposure, like something like that, so that we just step it up a little bit so that we could help her to also evaluate whether or not she can actually ever be able to do it. Because sometimes, and I don't think that's going to be for her, because she does okay when she does it. I think it's just that she can't handle what. So when someone gets that anxious, like she reports, it's then the recovery afterwards that is the body and the mind going, oh my God, that was horrific and draining and terrible. So it's more about then putting her in the position to expose it and then following through with the aftercare to make it so that it becomes shorter and shorter periods of time of distress after the fact of body and mind. So, and it would take a process. It's not like in the next 4 weeks, all of a sudden, someone, but certainly I know that if I stepped in the next 4 weeks, I could certainly make a difference for her to not have that. I don't know who's helping her. I don't know. I know that the different teams, I'm not sure if the Japanese team or whoever she's working with has a sports psychologist or someone. I would imagine they
everybody's got one now, don't they?
But not everybody does the same kinds of stuff that I do, or Joe Massimo, who used to be the team psychologist for the USA Gymnastics here in Massachusetts before. So everyone's got different takes on how to do these things, but certainly, I think when you've come from a background, you've been on both sides of camera and doing this, you know the anxiety and how it is to perform. I would have never spoken. You'd never know that now.
Yeah.
It took me to go to acting school in New York City for me to stand in front of people to be able to pull myself together to not feel like I was going to die.
Yeah.
Like I'd go out to perform something verbally and I'd have that blank out right at the beginning going,
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably what happens to her, because the report from most athletes, when I talk to them about doing social media events and reporting after their events, is it's the same. I go totally blank and have no idea what I said. Don't remember the interview because the anxiety goes.
Sure.
So, did I answer your question, Lou?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes. Okay. Did I ask a question?
For John. Put you both out in the river.
Because that asks the basic question of how you deal with any given challenge, mental health challenge that you have. Because your impulses are to retreat or charge forward. Mm-hmm. It's usually a decision you're making with any of these anxieties, right?
Right.
And I'm sure it's different in each individual case.
Right. And the goal is never to get a person to avoid.
Right.
Right. It wouldn't be like, I would never advocate for her to just be like, step out of this and never have to do it again. It would be about being empathetic to validate that this is scary. This is really worrisome for her, and that she needs some space so that she can work on it to see where she can actually get comfortable. And she's young. And another piece of that is, and I don't know her, I know some about her family and stuff. Culturally, This is not, the culture
Right.
is humble. The culture doesn't go out and boast. The culture doesn't go out and talk about oneself in this way. So culturally, I believe she's been raised to, you're there to do the sport. You're there. You are tennis. You are the racket. You are the ball. You are one. This other stuff, that's not, mainstream America. We teach everyone to talk about everything,
Yep.
do everything, put your emotions out there, tell everybody how. Kyrie.
Sounds like she's big enough to do a pool, though. I mean, just set up your own interview thing. Just get your own camera, your own tape. I'll invite her in. She can come in and talk to me. I'll talk to one person or two people, and then I get control over the interview. Nothing live, and
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that they're going to have to make some provisions for her if they
Yeah.
want her to speak in terms of that, because it's like accommodating anyone with any other kind of
Yep.
challenge. That certain things can't be, or, whatever that will be. So I just feel I feel empathy because I know the deal, and this was like at the heart of doing sports psych this weekend and watching her struggle. And
I think she should talk to Bill. That's what I think. I think
You do?
Bill
You
should
think
coach
so?
her up.
I think, well, I know Bill gets a bad rap though, because I have a.
Bill
you've seen the
Bill is
you've
the
seen the
best.
picture. I have a couple pictures of him with me, and everyone's like, he's smiling. I'm like, he does smile. That's a social setting. We were in a bar.
I have
We were
never,
together at a bar.
I've never had any kind of close opportunity. I've done a lot of press conferences with Bill, but I've never had a close opportunity. But my theory has always been, if you could get on Bill's boat with a few beers on a Sunday afternoon, you would love the guy. I'm guessing
great
he's
guy.
one of those guys.
Oh, he's super. He's the coach, and the
Yeah.
Sunday or Thursday night football is not the man.
Right.
It's just not.
And you can see it sometimes in the interviews. You get him sometimes on the Thursday interview. If you get him in the right subject matter, you start talking about an old giant or LT or something like that, or talk about his days in with the Navy team, and and he gets going, and you just I think if you, in a social situation, I bet he'd be a great guy to hang out with.
I can attest to the fact that he's a lot of fun, and he's lots of smiles and lots of laughs, and he's chatty.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
Yes, very chatty, as long as we're not talking about the current game at hand.
Yeah.
Which is normal. Like, how do you think you're going to play? We're going to play. Like,
which I love and respect.
yeah, because he keeps and here's something for Naomi too, is like keeping the boundary.
Yep.
If someone taught her how to, if someone says, well, how do you think you're going to do? I don't have a crystal ball. I have no idea. I'm going to go out and play. I would give her what to say. I'd be like, this is what you're going to say.
We're on to Cincinnati.
Right? We're on, I don't know. Like, there's no crystal ball. I'm going to play with what I know. I go with what I know.
Yep.
And I'm sure they'd be like, well, she's being difficult. No, it's truth. Like, here's what it is. Why is it okay for one person to say it like that?
You're trying to get into her mentality. That's an elite athlete's mentality.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to prepare the best I can. Be ready. We'll see what happens.
So what I often tell my athletes is that, I just had an athlete make a couple athletes, but one in particular that I used this technique with a couple weeks ago. He just made a NFL team, and I used to just say to him all the way up to his pro day and everything, was like, go with what you know, go with what you know, go with what you know. Don't stray from that.
Right.
And that was his mantra. Go with what I know. Go with what I know. Go. So because everything else, I said, everything else is peripheral. All else is chatter. Go with what you know. Don't worry about what you don't know. What someone else says you should know. Go with what you know. It's the same thing.
Bill's media availabilities are art. They're absolutely art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after the first OTA, they were asking about Mac Jones.
Yeah.
Did not answer the question about Mac Jones. Talked about the quarterback group. Just went to a whole team thing, and everybody's doing it. His first word was everybody. Was not going to answer the question about Mac Jones. Was going to talk about everything else.
Nope.
Yeah.
And there's why I would say that, for someone like Naomi, or someone like, if you take Naomi, Simone Biles, gymnast, right, Michael Phelps, all that, they're all in the different levels of their comfortability.
Right.
It's like, I always put it into the modality of, you're in the tunnel on the train tracks. You're either at the beginning of the tunnel, somewhere in the middle, or at the end because you've gotten through. Michael Phelps is on the other side of the tunnel. Simone Biles is on the other side of the tunnel. She's fresh. She's just entering the tunnel, and she's got something that she's given words to things that other people aren't talking about that are there for other people. They just been too afraid because they're going to get fined, or they're going to get fired, or they're going to get moved, or whatever it is. But she's at the beginning of the tunnel. She's got to get through the tunnel, and that may take some time. She's young. Everyone needs to lighten up. Yep. Lighten up, Francis. I'm movie referencing today.
I'll play
Name the movie.
Play the old Mickey Mantle when was it Mantle who got fined one time?
Yes.
And he handed him about 3 times the fine and said, "That's for the next time."
Yeah.
It's like, just take the fine.
Yep.
You want to do the interview? Take the fine.
But again, right? Difference in age, experience. You know, she's this young girl going, deer in headlights, going, I have no idea what to do with this. This is like so, and culturally, again, the shame. Even though she won and beat Serena, and that's like amazing. She got booed. I don't know if you've ever seen the tape on that.
No.
She got booed. Like, she won and she did amazing. And the whole stadium.
She got booed because she beat Serena?
How shaming. What?
Why'd they boo her? Because she beat Serena?
Because she beat Serena.
Yeah.
And they wanted Serena. And how.
But you know the mentality
at the time. And how brutal your shining moment of being the best and beating the best. And Serena was very gracious and lovely and just Serena, as always. But the whole crowd was just brutal. And ever since then, she says her self-esteem and everything else, even though she's this, she's clearly countering it by being the best player and continuing to do, but that ate at her. So there's shame and there's guilt and there's awful feelings that have no reality base. They're all threat generation, but they're threat generation out of the fact that people were booing her and she didn't know how to put it aside.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Because you have the experience and I have the experience of understanding what those boos were.
Right.
That was honoring.
Right.
That was that was nothing. That was nothing anti towards her. It was just that Serena lost.
Right.
And
but
by the way,
generated that that's not what it was.
I know. Yeah.
Right.
It's same event. Your perspective on it. Right.
The narrative, the story from last week, the storyline you tell.
That wasn't a personal attack on her. That was people like Serena.
Right, and that's where hopefully they have someone to intervene, stating something to her like, "Hey, had I been there, my thing would have been like, this was not about you. Everyone that means something is so proud of you, and that's just because you ended an era of tennis. It's like when someone beats Tiger Woods, it's like, oh my God, and it's, and Tiger's like, just like Serena, it happens. It's okay. Because
there are X amount of people in that arena who are there because they got excited when Serena was at the top of her game.
Right.
There are people at golf tournaments because of Tiger Woods.
Right.
So they have a hard time dealing with the changing of the guard.
Right. And it would be interesting. I doubt this is going to happen this summer, but when the Olympics happen and Simone Biles goes, she's going to wipe the floor with everybody because she's so amazing. She's doing new skills that are all named after her. They're better than anything that's ever been done. Yeah. She's landing them all. She's like, amazing. But if she doesn't perform to the level she is ready for and something happens and she gets beat, it's not, she's older now. This is her multiple Olympics. She's way older than typically that we do have females in gymnastics in the Olympics. Has a life outside of just being a gymnast. Her identity is different, all these things. She's not a kid anymore. Any factor you could accumulate to be like, oh, she's life lessened and she's going to be very different. I think the audience will be upset, but I think that, and maybe it's the way that gymnasts are trained, we're very hardened to the fact that we're so criticized and so put down all the time.
Yeah.
That if someone's booing us, we're like, whatever. Like, oh, you're booing me?
Yeah.
Well, that's because I suck. I know. Because we're so used to being told it's not good enough anyway, so might as well just take it anyway from our whole crowd of people.
Can I take you into the woods on a related question?
Sure.
Because this aggravates me every year. I get into this every year.
Okay.
Having the Little League World Series on ESPN is basically child abuse.
Yeah.
There's no reason those kids should be on that level of a stage. Just kids.
Moneymaker.
I understand. Yeah. I understand why ESPN does it. I understand why it's broadcast. But I just see these kids on there, and there's a potential for. Think about it. The kids aren't handled for this. They're not even a lot. Some of them will be top athletes, but they're not top athletes yet. They're not used to this environment.
Right.
And they go in and they're doing, up close and personal profiles, and they get coaches mic'd, and it's like, on national TV, God, that's too much for these guys.
Right. Well, Lou, it's not really going into the woods because look at how many. That's like saying, let's talk about all the child actors that have come up through. Yeah. Right. So the Corey Feldmans of the world, and the Corey Haims, and the Sean Astin's and all,
Yep.
and it's the same thing. Not
But at
every
least they
child,
get a check, and your athlete gets a check. These kids show up, they do a week on ESPN, they go home,
right,
and deal with the
right.
deal with the
It's
fallout.
it's their stint of their 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their other 12-year-old companions are watching them, boot a ball on national TV.
Right. Well, so there's two sides to that, which
Yeah.
I totally get, that like it's a lot of pressure and all that stuff. And clearly it's a moneymaker for ESPN and whatever. Now, on the actual athlete side, it's kind of like kids who are training for the Olympics. They go to the next level. They have the state, the regionals, the nationals. They're not all televised, but they certainly are. They're motivators. In my sport that I was in, it was always considered a motivator to get you to the next, because your end goal is to go to the Olympics. Your
Sure.
end goal is
Yep.
to be a National League player. Your end goal is to be on the NFL. Your end goal is to be, right. So without that dangling carrot out there, there's not a lot to go for, because everybody else would then get a trophy, kind of thing. So it's
Right.
it's going from the one extreme to the other in the concept there. So do we exploit and expose? No, but it happens, unfortunately, in all sports. I can't think. Well, maybe curling. Who knows? Try to give everyone fair shake here, but it's and it doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, I think, if I look at it from a psychological perspective in sports, it's the carrot dangle of like, look at what your kid may never make it to the Red Sox,
Yeah.
but
Oh, I understand why
Right.
they want to be there. It's
Right.
just that the potential for trauma
oh
is
god, yeah.
enormous.
But okay, so now my mindset is, there's no difference in my mindset other than the TV cameras and the exposure nationally between the varsity #1 player in, let's say, Chelmsford, Massachusetts on the baseball team versus the kid that was just on TV for ESPN in terms of the pressure and identity. And the season's over. This kid's going off to their Division I school, maybe or maybe not playing. This kid may or may not go on and keep playing and go into some major league, blah, blah, blah. But it's the same thing. It's like the identity of the athlete is like, now what?
Well,
Am I going to continue to play? Is it over? Like, I didn't make it. Is someone going to recruit me? I mean,
one is 17, 18.
right, and one is
And not national
12.
TV, and the other's
Right.
on national TV, and they're 12.
12, right.
And, the other one's playing, the 17-year-old's playing for a scholarship. There's something to be had
Right.
there. Everyone wants to excel, do the best they can. Every Little League kid wants to play on national TV in the Little
Right.
League World Series, but then the ball goes through his legs.
Right.
Or he gives up 8 runs. And ends up crying on the mound with the coach coming out and trying to console him.
Right.
It's like that stays with you forever.
And that's so. What I'm saying about that is,
Yeah.
one is it's just happened to be filmed on national TV.
Yeah.
And if they weren't filming it and they were doing the Little League Championships not on national TV, that stuff would still happen. It's just now it's being added with the extra, and it's traumatizing either way. The additional national exposure will be more traumatizing, because certainly if a kid isn't as resilient as another kid and saying like, oh my God, I'm worried about what people think of me, which is what most athletes do,
Yep.
which they'll tell you they don't, but that's not true.
No.
That's the downside of that is it's and now on an individual
You're an
level
athlete
when
too.
I'm working with them, it's I would know their level of resiliency to know where you have to intervene at a coach level, a family level, the kids, the team, and saying like we have to rally. Like when I work with teams, I always work with them on surrounding yourselves as a team, working as a unit. We're not an I, so that means when someone's out on the mound crying, we don't look and point and say, oh, poor Johnny, he's a mess, too bad for him, now get off the mound. We rally and say, what can we do to make this better for Johnny?
Yeah, well, then he's got to go back to 7th grade, but that's to the 7th grade school. Athletes are about athletes is a self-identity. Athletes
Right. Athleticism.
are concerned with self-image. They become athletes because that's the area of their lives where they feel most accomplished and that they feel most skilled in.
Right.
That's where they're most comfortable.
Right.
So almost by definition, an athlete is concerned about their self-image. And
Right.
that's not a problem. We all are. That's human condition.
Right. It just happens to be that when you're doing athleticism type events, you're more exposed.
Right.
And so
Plus your ups and downs, your self-image is more quantified.
Well,
You have a one-loss record. You have a time. You have it's who you are based on your 40 speed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and one thing I was going to say about like, the age group you're talking about in terms of the little leaguers and also Osaka, Naomi, is this developmental period is the spotlight effect developmentally. So the spotlight effect, for people that don't know, is all kids. Usually starts around 11-ish, 12, sometimes a little earlier depending on how they're raised, but they all go through at least a year or two or 4 or 5 of, I think everybody's looking at me and only thinking about me and judging me and everything. And
yeah.
I have this conversation with kids 20,000 times a week.
Yep.
Of, if you're thinking that way and all your friends are the same age, and I tell them exactly, I'm like, this is spotlight effect. I tell them what it is, so they're really clear. And like, do you actually think that they're thinking about you if they're all doing the same thing? And you have these really cool aha moments. It doesn't always change it, but they have.
Yeah.
And so when I can go back and just say, you're playing tennis, no one's thinking about you.
Right.
Because they're all worried about when they're going to play their next match. They're just getting you off the court. They're not watching you. They don't care.
Right.
And they only care if you're playing with them and they're watching you for you. They're not looking at what you wear, what you didn't wear, how your hair was, whether you tripped, you didn't, whatever. They don't care because they're worried about whether they're going to trip, whether they're going to look. So, and
right.
I think that that's a lot of what you were, you weren't talking about it, but you were talking about kids. And I think that that's a piece that gets missed when people do coaching, is that they don't look at the kids for what's really going on in them while they're on the field, while they're playing, is that they're all sitting there doing this thing in their head, even if it's not creating total anxiety, that they're like, someone's watching me, I'm going to mess up, I'm not perfect. And when people say, oh, that doesn't happen for me or them or what, that's not true. Not true, because you can't escape the developmental period of 11 to 18, 19 years old of spotlight effect. It's like the built-in narcissism of teenagerdom, right? So of worrying about disappointing coaches, parents, themselves, media, fans, all this stuff. I mean, I just locally, I work with a couple local athletes that are high-ranking, going to go to Division I colleges. They have the same worries that the guys that I just had go to the NFL, and they're real worries for them because their mindset is like, I don't want anyone to see me as being less than I am. And it doesn't matter, Division I school, going to whatever.
It's funny, this whole World Series thing and what you're talking about took a page turn for me when my son was playing Little League.
Right.
And it's like, I was an athlete growing up and had some success. I was never worried about my performance. I mean, worried to the normal extent, but it was like, look, I work hard, I do the best I can, what happens, happens.
Right.
That type of thing. But watching my kid play, that was terrifying.
Right.
That was hard for me because you didn't want the ball to go between his legs. You didn't want him to strike out in a key situation.
Right.
It was like the stakes seemed so much higher, and then that's when I started developing. And then they got kids like this who are on national television going through this.
Right.
It's nuts.
Right. Well, it's and because it's huge pressure.
Yeah.
And that's when I have, I've had kids go to the Little League.
And I don't remember feeling that in Little League either. I mean, it just went out and played.
Well, right. So I've had kids go to the Little League series and be on TV. Most recently, this is a very big thing, is that the national cheerleading events.
Yes.
That is huge pressure.
Yep.
I mean, when people are like, oh, cheerleaders. No. This is, it's not cheering and just like,
No, and those are intense.
And like just pom-poms and being like, yay, go team.
No.
This is
the
like
team and coaching is intense.
Skills. And when you're a flyer and you've got high-risk moves, you're full on and you're like 25 feet up in the air being caught by teenagers by underneath you. Oh, my God. Right? On national TV.
Yep. And
you're 14 with a bow in your hair.
Right.
And supposed to not be imperfect and trusting 6 people to base you. Oh my God. People. So it's like, it's, to your point, it's the same kind of like, watching, you go, oh my God, I hope no one drops anybody. But also that set of kids that are doing that are so worried about letting the team down, not performing correctly. And essentially, if anyone, knows about cheerleading and that at that level, which is high level, when you're a flyer, you are one of 5 or 6 that are only flyers on the team. So you're front and center. So any mistake is the mistake of the team.
Right.
And you are the win or the loss for the team. If you slip, if you fall, if you trip, so it's like the ball going through the legs. It's so much pressure on a person.
Yeah, my girlfriend's daughter was a flyer, and it's like, you're hurt and you've got to perform with the team because they don't have another flyer, or they don't, you
Right.
know, they don't perform if you're not able to perform. And it's like, the injuries she performed with, it's like, that's nuts at
Yeah, I
this
had a
age.
flyer a couple of years ago that had 14 at the time, now older, but she was performing at nationals with two, I will say they were shattered hips, and
Oh, my God.
she ended up having surgery 6 or 7 months apart on both hips
Knowingly?
because of cheerleading.
Knowingly? They put her out there knowingly? Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
Not my daughter.
She was the only flyer. They needed her. See, this is so it's to the point, right?
Yeah,
It's to the point, and that's the thing. So, and now she bases. There's no more flying for her.
No, those people.
Nope. She's a base. She's now a base, and people out there are probably thinking, "What's a flyer? What's a base?"
That'll get you. Being a flyer will get you eating.
Yes, being a flyer is
Get you out of the flyer.
As
The
a
flyer
gymnast,
is the
I
girl
would
they throw
love-
all over the place. They throw
would
her up in
be-
the air, and
Exactly.
she flies. That's why they call her a flyer.
Right. Well, and being a flyer, I was a gymnast, as you all know, that I will fly as long as it's in my control. But if I have to trust you to catch me,
Exactly. Yeah.
you've lost your mind, because I know how to land a double back or a triple twist or a dismount off the balance beam or a vault. But if I'm going to rely on you as 1 or 2 people to catch my entire weight coming at a force of 4 to 7 times my weight, which is at the time was only 100 pounds, oh no.
You're going to trust a couple of 14-year-old boys to catch you?
So that is the sport of all hail. People are like, oh, cheerleading. I'm
God,
like,
yeah.
well, that's kind of a tough sport. I'd like
It's
to see anybody
intense.
go and do that.
The workouts, the coaching, it's intense. It's an intense environment.
I've gone and coached and
It's not
consulted.
yay, we're cheering. It's
Because it's serious tumbling and lots of throws, and like you've got to be in shape for that. It's not like your old-fashioned.
And your life depends on a 14-year-old boy.
Right.
And
Right.
and 2 of your 14-year-old friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, this was a wonderful conversation, and certainly, hopefully, people will be mindful. I always ask people to be mindful of whatever it is, but today would be mindful of, if you have kids, if you have teenagers, if you have athletes in your life, even if they're adults, like being mindful of the fact that, there's so much that goes into the performance and how one feels about themselves because of it, whether they're on national TV or local or just your family, is just being mindful of, like, that's so important to how the person feels about themselves, and why take that away from anybody?
Yep.
Listen, if you're out there doing something, you're doing way more than anybody else is sitting on the couch.
That's right.
So, on that note, everyone have a fantastic week, and I will be back here to talk to you about personality disorders next week.
Excellent. I like personality disorders.
Personality disorders.
Yeah.
We'll have to diagnose you.
Okay, cool. That'd be fun.
All right, you guys have a great week.